All right, we are recording. Welcome everyone to another episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy. In fact, it is the 15th episode. I know this because Derri reminded me before we started recording. It is the 15th episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy, and it is my pleasure to introduce to you my wonderful guest, Derri from Derri's Reddit Before. Hello, Derri.
Hi, it's very, very, very flattering to have been invited, and I'm very happy to be here to waffle on about the things I like.
Yes, indeed. Well, the honor is mine, and I am so excited to talk to you because there are a couple series that I know for a fact that you are very well read in, and yes. I intend to be reading a bit more in those series. I've read a wee bit in both Discworld and Realm of the Elderlings. But I have a lot further to go in both series, and I can't wait to hear some wisdom from you, some tips from you, and lots of good. I mean, we're just going to have a good time talking about these series. I actually do love them as well. I just haven't finished them yet. So, in fact, Realm of the Elderlings made it into my top 5, just on the basis of the first 2 trilogies, which I did read in order. So
you did. Well done.
I did. I know. I watched your video where you were.
It genuinely hurts my brain when people say you can start with live ships.
Yeah. Although I will
bothers me a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I started with Farseer, so I'm good. I'm good. I do know some people who love Realm of the Elderlings, like Chris from Chris Bookish Cauldron, for example, who did accidentally, I think, start with live ship, but he probably
it's not the end of the world.
No, it's okay as long as you end up loving Hobb anyway.
Yeah. I mean, there are people I've spoken to in the various Discords who begin in like the Rainwild Traders, which is the second to last sub-series. Yeah. Because it isn't particularly well stated on the covers that they're part of a greater overall series. So it's nobody's fault if they start out of order when they didn't know. I mean, that's just how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it's a good recommendation, I think, because without getting into any spoilers, because we don't do spoilers here on Dear Dr. Fantasy, but I think for me, I'm glad I read Farseer first, because there are certain things that you do while they are in different parts of that world, there are connections, and certain things make more sense if you've read Farseer before live ship. So so I'm glad I did it in that order. And speaking of Realm of the Elderlings, I can't help but show off something that I just got today, and it is exactly like a book that is right behind you. And it is Assassin's Apprentice.
And isn't it just beautiful?
It is.
They are beautiful.
Gorgeous. It is absolutely gorgeous. There's some wonderful, I mean, there's an amazing
art.
The art is tremendous. This is a work of art as well as, and I already know it's a great book because I'll be rereading it. But and I want to actually, part of the reason why I wanted to show it off is also to thank the people who sent it to me. Some of our dear friends on BookTube sent it to me, and that would be Joanna and Alan and Jimmy. So
Jimmy sent me my copy.
Is that right? Well,
I have these very old first edition mass market paperbacks, which you can probably tell are a bit worn, because I have read them that many times. Yeah. But my copy of Assassin's Apprentice fell off the shelf. Ooh. And because it looked like this, it disintegrated.
It fell apart. Yeah.
And I was properly beside myself. I was so upset. Oh. And Jimmy sent me this beautiful new edition, and it was a good thing. I was not in a good place when my book died. That I was very upset. And so Jimmy is clearly doing the good work. Spreading the Hobb love.
He's become a huge fan of Realm of the Elderlings, of course, as well. But what a place this is. What a wonderful place we stumbled into here on BookTube with all these lovely people, these just very kind, thoughtful people who love books. I mean, does it get any better than that?
So great.
Yeah.
It's so great. I mean, I'm in New Zealand. So
yes,
when I started reading fantasy, I was very much reading in isolation. I'm the only person in my friend group that reads fiction mostly, and within fiction, fantasy mostly. So it's very rare I ever had anyone to talk to about what I was reading. Plus, it was New Zealand, and we didn't have ebooks, and there wasn't an Amazon to sell me stuff on the internet. So I was very much at the mercy of bookshops that weren't catering to niche readers. So I had really limited books to read. I had no one really to talk to about them. BookTube has been a lifesaver. It is the most amazing thing to suddenly have wonderful people who give me insights to books I've read so often. And I'm like, I never even thought of that. Because the discussion gives us so much more to our stories. And BookTube rules.
Certainly in our lives it's been a really wonderful boon. So you said the internet was an issue there in New Zealand. Is that because
it's more that it was only sort of 15 years ago that I had an internet connection, and it's really been only in the last 10 years that sort of that interconnectivity has become ordinary. That everybody's doing it, not just young people. And then it's just the exponential growth of the internet came at a time after I was sort of an adult. Which I'm sure you can relate to. And so it's all been a learning process, and I'm always a little bit behind the changes and the updates to everything and new things that are available.
I am too. I'm terrible that way. I'm so usually
I came very late to BookTube. And again, it was Jimmy. It was his Hobb. He just started reading Hobb when I discovered him, and of course that was me. I was like, and
perfect timing.
It really was.
No, that's wonderful. And I've not been to New Zealand myself, and of course so many of us who watch I'm sorry to bring this up because you Kiwis are probably
don't apologize.
You're tired of hearing about Lord of the Rings and the Shire and all that.
Maybe a non-fantasy reader might be. I love it.
Okay.
Because this is my thing. And I live here. And I've been to Hobbiton, and it's the most amazing, wonderful place.
I'm jealous now.
Here's a bit of trivia for you.
Okay.
When they filmed at Mount Doom, Mount Doom is one of the mountains in one of our national parks. And because it's a national park, they had to jump through a lot of hoops to get permission to film there. And the final hoop they had to jump through was in guaranteeing they wouldn't kill a rare form of moss that grows on this mountain that doesn't grow anywhere else. They bought every single piece of secondhand carpet in the country and carpeted the road up so they could get all of the gear up to film. And I just think that's a marvelous piece of trivia.
I do too. There were so many things about those films that obviously they were so meticulous about. And that is one reason why they're as great as they are, why they've won collectively more Oscars than any other film series. I think Return of the King is tied for first place itself, all by itself. The number of Oscars won with 11 or something like that.
I think Titanic was the other one.
Ben-Hur, I think maybe as well.
Might be, yes, because there's a couple that are sitting there with it. But we're very proud of Peter Jackson here. We're very proud of him,
rightly so,
because his as a baby filmmaker, he's made some odd movies.
I know. Yeah, I'm aware.
Some very strange movies.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a natural thing necessarily, like for him to suddenly leap to fame with Lord of the Rings, with this huge, massive, epic, because his previous films had been a bit odd. I think it's fair to say, a little different. So.
Well, he liked special effects. He's always loved special effects.
Yes. So there's a connection there.
It falls into horror mostly.
Yeah.
But it's very Kiwi horror. It's very strange. It's got a very odd kind of humor to it. But when he went mainstream, he made a film with Michael J. Fox called The Frighteners. Okay. And that's actually a surprisingly good little comedy horror film. And the menace, the horrific menace in the film predates the Dementors from Harry Potter, but has a very similar feel to it. And at that point, Peter Jackson was like, CGI has come far enough. I can make Lord of the Rings now. That's what I needed to know. And that was when he and Fran and they all got together and did the screenplay. Yeah. Because suddenly the effects were there that he could use. Yeah. So he's always been about the effects. And there's a ton of native talent there in New Zealand too, the Weta Workshop and all of that. I mean, it's just tremendous how he managed to bring together all these different resources and so much talent, and a lot of it native. But just, he made, I think it's going to be talked about in the history of cinema as long as there's cinema, I think so. I think it's up there with things like, as you say, Ben-Hur and Gone with the Wind and the big epic. Yeah. I think because it is. I mean, it's epic. Yeah. Yeah, and it's there's so much fantasy gets filmed in New Zealand. A lot of TV fantasy gets filmed here. Yeah. And so there's this almost like a cachet to being an effects person in New Zealand, because you've done these things. You've been on Lord of the Rings. You've been on the opening season for Wheel of Time, however that went down. You've done the Rings of Power first season. There's so many of the big shows, but so many little ones as well get filmed here. Yeah. And I mean, you've got a diverse and breathtakingly beautiful landscape. And in a lot of places do. I mean, there's certainly beautiful places in the States and in Canada. Where we benefit is that it's small. Everywhere's close together. Yeah. So getting the technical equipment from point A to point B is so much faster, and your crew can move so much more quickly. So your filming time is less. And our government likes people to come here and spend their money. So there's good tax breaks for film to be welcome down here. And it's just this little place of perfection. Yeah, well, I hope to visit someday. I really do. I definitely would love to visit someday. I just, it's a beautiful place in and of itself. It's a bit of a trip from the States, that's for sure. Yeah, and we're an end point. You don't go through New Zealand to get to anywhere else. Yeah, which means that we're that much more expensive as well, because we're not a transit point to somewhere else. Yeah, yeah. When you add all that together, it's a lot. Well, it's a beautiful enough place that people are willing to make that trip. So, and that'll be me someday or other, I hope. Yay. So I'll take you to Hobbiton and buy you a beer. I will do all the cliche fantasy lover stuff. I will go to Hobbiton. I will do all that. Here's a trick for anyone who ever comes to New Zealand and wants to go to Hobbiton. Yeah. Book the earliest tour through. Okay. Because the tours go, I think, every hour, every half an hour. But when you come through Hobbiton, the first tour has nobody in front of them. So all of your photos don't have another tour group in them. So you can take the sprawling shots. Whereas if you go later in the day, the group before you is still on the tour down the hill and over at the pub. And so you're getting just big groups of human-sized people. And So yes, for the best photos, you need to be on the early shuttle.
Early tour. Okay, great tip. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure there's some amazing hikes in New Zealand, and I love hiking myself, so I will be.
I can't attest to them personally. I'm a sit down on my bum and read person.
Uh-huh.
Outside, this is how I have this lovely pale complexion. I don't do outside.
Uh-huh.
But our Prime Minister does, and she does all the walks, and she opens new walks, and we do have some like internationally rated, excellent hiking trails all over the country.
Yeah.
And it is a beautiful place. For all that I don't go out in it very often, it is beautiful here.
Yes, well, there's beauty to be had within stories as well. So
that's right.
And
no sunburn.
Go ahead.
And no sunburn.
And no sunburn. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
we have very high UV here. The ozone layer is really thin here.
Oh, like it was over Australia for the longest
time. It's worse here.
Really?
You can get sunburned here when it's overcast and you have clothes on. If your clothing is light enough, you can get sunburned through it. And the minute summer rolls around, you're getting a UV warning.
Okay.
Sunburn time today could be 7 minutes.
Wow, I did not know this. I mean, I always heard about the hole in the ozone over Australia, but I didn't realize that it must be the same hole, I guess, or
I don't know if it's still a hole. I know that it is repairing itself, but certainly the level of UV that makes it to the land is much higher over both us and Australia, and so it's very, very, very easy to get sunburnt here before you even realize it.
Wow.
And so so I burn really easily, so I just stay inside.
Yeah. Well, good thing you have some good books to read then. So
that's right. Yes, I do.
Speaking of which, so I mentioned early on that the really on your channel, Derri's read it before. Yep. You extensively discuss particularly two series. Yes. And they happen to be series that I'm very, very, as I mentioned earlier, excited to be delving further into. So you tell me which one you want to talk about first.
I generally don't have a preference because I do love them both, and they're very, very different. I don't know that you could really get much more different.
True. Yeah, they're very different representations of
they really are
in the world of fantasy.
And to be fair, Discworld's different to everything.
That's true.
Nothing is similar to Discworld, and people have tried, and there's just something incredibly unique about the way Sir Terry saw the world.
Yeah.
And the layers that he can get in his writing are just mind-bogglingly brilliant. I was thrilled when I discovered Alan's channel, and one of the first videos of his I saw, he was talking about guards, and he was talking about the word play and how very Shakespearean Terry can be.
That's true. I was
like, yes, he is, because he plays with words. There's an enjoyment of words and language and how you can string a sentence to make something funny, even though it's not inherently funny. And I'm a reader. We're all readers. We like words. When they're put together cleverly, there's joy in that. And he had just a gift with words. He really, really did. Love the Discworld books so much.
Yeah, they're quite amazing. Yeah. So
what I've read. You haven't read very many, have you?
No, I haven't yet. I have. So I read the first two before I even knew about BookTube.
That's right. Yes.
So I read the two Rincewind books, the Color of Magic and the Light Fantastic.
Yeah.
And then because of Alan, I read Guards, and that's all I've read so far, and I loved Guards, and I have on my shelf waiting for me to read. So I'm curious to read 3 series within Discworld, and one of them is I want to continue the City Watch books that begin with Guards, for sure, because I loved it. I also want to read The Witches. So I have the first witchy book, Weird Sisters.
Equal. Weird Sisters.
Or is it equal rights? Or is it
equal rights? Is the first of the Discworld books to have witches.
Okay.
But it's in the very first batch of books that kind of aren't Discworld. I talk about this on my channel, but Sir Terry got into writing Discworld kind of as a joke. This is a ridiculous genre of books, and anyone could write this. I mean, it's dumb. So he wrote the first 3, mocking every piece of fantasy trope he could find.
There's a lot of parody. There's a lot of parody in those.
So much. Every name's got apostrophes. There's dragons, the plot holes you could drive a truck through. There are MacGuffins galore.
There's a geriatric Conan.
Oh, Cohen is brilliant. We get Cohen a lot. Cohen is brilliant. Cohen the Barbarian is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Cohen the Barbarian is who Logan Ninefingers is going to turn into one day. And this is genius, is that you get this fabulous warrior. Well, what if he never loses? What if he doesn't die?
Yeah.
Suddenly he's, this ancient scented, just wizened old man who still can beat anybody. And it's hilarious because he doesn't have any teeth. So he has to eat soup because he can't have meat, and he hates that he can't have meat. And yet all of the beautiful girls love him because he's the hero.
Yeah. Boy.
The trope in it is brilliant. But anyway, the tropes in the first few books are the point.
Yeah.
And then he wasn't going to go back to it. And Neil Gaiman, who they'd met through both of them having been journalists before writing, Neil Gaiman said to him, I actually really liked the character of Death. Would you write one with Death?
Yeah.
And so we got Mort. And Mort, I think, opened Terry's eyes and went, I could play with this. And it starts to shift into what Discworld becomes, where instead of parodying and satire and mockery of fantasy, this world became a canvas where he could mock reality.
Yeah.
And once he'd made that shift, from about Guards on, it's Discworld as it truly is.
Okay.
But so Equal Rights is in the full mockery stage, but he'd created a character he would bring back and grow into one of my favorite characters, Granny Weatherwax.
Right.
Weird Sisters is also before Guards, but again, the Witches, I love the Witches. They're my favorite of the sub-series.
Okay.
The Witches characters exist, I think, almost outside of Discworld. Their books tend not to be about story. Their books are about them, and the story is just there to give them a framework to play in.
Okay.
And his witches are women that have met, have in your family, and I love them. They're fabulous.
Wow.
I'm turning slowly into Nanny Hogg, which is fine.
That's great.
I don't have a problem with that. I don't smoke, but I could take it up, I suppose.
Probably not the best idea anyway.
No. Smoking a pipe's better for you than
a pipe else. If you're going to smoke, I suppose. Yeah, maybe a pipe would be less unhealthy.
And I have more teeth than she does. But, the characters in the Witches are, I think you would very much enjoy the Witches because the framework, because all of the sub-series have a different sort of thematic feel to them. The Death books tend to be very philosophical.
Yeah, that's the other series I want to read. I have Mort.
He's very curious about humanity and how we cope with being alive. And so they're very deep thoughts. He ponders very deep thoughts, Death. So they're very existential. They're very deep. I mean, they're also hilarious.
I have met Death. I think he appeared in Guards. Is that right? Yeah.
He's in all of them.
Yeah.
He's in 40 of the 41 books he appears.
Yeah.
We see a lot of Death, which is good because he's actually not in his own books a lot.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
He's usually the B plot of his own books.
Interesting.
And I think I've said this to somebody recently. I think it would be a bit much to have much more because he thinks such very deep and profound thoughts. I think we'd lose the humor of him if we had more, and we get so much of him in other books. So the character, I was about to say, becomes fleshed out, but he's a skeleton, so that doesn't work. So we get a lot of character in the other books.
Only Terry Pratchett could flesh out Death, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. and you do see a lot of him in the Watch books. He and Vimes have quite a number of interactions over the years. The Watch books that's where Terry gets his social political boots on and gives reality a bit of a kicking in those ones.
I think that's why Alan likes them so much.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Because they do point out so many injustices.
Yeah.
And across the spectrum, I mean, he talks about everything from slavery and racism to sexism and ageism and socioeconomic divides and how that makes people interact differently. Like, it gets really heavy, but you kind of don't notice until you're finished. You're busy cracking up, having a good time, and then you finish and go, that actually had quite a lot to say.
Yeah.
The Watch books are brilliant for that. The Witches, as I say, I think you'll like them because they rely on myth and legend and fairy tale. And so the more you're aware of those things, the more you can see in the Witches books. I was speaking to Jose on Amazing Worlds last week, and he was saying, I always think of the Witches as living somewhere in Wales. And I thought, it's actually not wrong, because they live in the mountains, they live close to where the dwarves are, and I always think the dwarves are Welsh because they're miners and they live in mountains. Of course they live in Wales. You know, they're close to where the trolls live. There's burial mounds. It's very Britain, the history around the witches.
Yeah.
And they interact with it a lot. And like Granny will reference the stone circles and what they're guarding. Nanny visits the burial mounds to interact with the Green Man. And there's a lot of very Britain history there. Yeah. So I think that you'll get a lot out of those. The other sub-series, you've got the Wizards. Oddly, when I did the Wizard books on my channel and I had to really look at them closely, I realized that almost all of the Wizard books don't have very many wizards in them.
Just like
in the same way that the Death books don't have a lot of death. They do have Rincewind, and Rincewind isn't everybody's favorite character. He's not my favorite character.
Not even a very good wizard either.
He's a terrible wizard. That's kind of the point. But he generally gets dumped somewhere and is then used to explore other cultures.
Yeah.
So he can be fascinating to read. I just am not a huge fan of his. Death is in his a lot as well. Rincewind and Death know each other quite well.
Had some close brushes.
He very much has, and he has the most unique of all of Death's hourglasses. We meet most of the wizards in the Watch books because of the fact they live in the same city, and so they interact a lot.
Ankh-Morpork,
and Terry was known to say he couldn't write a story in the city without the Watch showing up, because they would. You know, something's going on in the city, the Watch is going to show up. Right. He said, so I just can't write a book there without them showing up. And they do. So you get these delightful little cameos from the Watch in any of the other books that are set in Ankh-Morpork. And that interconnectedness is what I love about Discworld, because
it's wonderful.
While the individual books are brilliant, It's only when you add them all together that they become this gumbo of world, and that it all brings in from the other series and develops the flavor when you put it all together.
Yeah. So the university also in Ankh-Morpork, it shows up in the Rincewind books, and that's where the librarian. Yes. Oh. Yeah. It's a great character.
Love the librarian. You also, with the Wizards books, you get Hex, and Hex is a creation of the younger Wizards.
Okay.
And he is pretty much a computer. Hex is a collection of odd magical things that memorizes spells, and one of these younger wizards has made it so this collection of machinery things can give him an answer. And within it lives a mouse. So the Hex has a mouse. It will stop working when the mouse runs out of cheese. So you get a message that goes, error, out of cheese.
Oh no.
Out of cheese error. So you get an out of cheese error. And it has, for some reason, a sheep's skull turned up out of nowhere and is on top of the machine. And if that falls off, it stops working. So it has RAM. And it has a BRL, which is a big red lever, and occasionally needs rebooting, which is to literally boot it. So all of this computer language that we're all really familiar with, Terry has turned into actual things for Hex to function. And Hex becomes its own character. And Hex is marvelous. And Hex plays a big role in the companion series to Discworld, The Science of Discworld.
Oh.
And that's different to other science of books, because you've seen those before around things like Star Trek or Star Wars. They try and put our science on that property.
Right.
The Science of Discworld does it the other way around. And it has the Wizards of Discworld discovering Roundworld, which is Roundworld, and looking at it like universities would, and trying to study it and find out what makes it work what happens when this. So because they live on a disc, they don't get the physics of it, and they don't understand how it can operate without magic. And so we're learning about our own science from a Discworld perspective, and they're incredibly well worth reading because they alternate chapters between the wizards learning a thing, and then there's a chapter from actual science people explaining what it is they've just discovered in layperson's terms. So they're remarkably insightful books, and yet remain true to Discworld. They're really, really good. They're well worth reading.
Oh, wonderful.
And Hex plays a major part of that as Discworld's computer equivalent.
Wow. Well, I wish we had a Hex at the college where I teach.
It depends. Have you got enough cheese?
Oh, that's true. Yeah, we'd have to have cheese on hand, wouldn't we? Yeah.
Oh, yes. You do get some very strange responses from Hex. He caught the Bursar's, they called it the Bursar's sickness or disease, because the Bursar's mad. He's batty. He's completely batty. And he's addicted to dried frog pills. Because they figured we would just have to keep him on the same wavelength of insane that makes him think that he's normal. So, because this is how the wizards think. And so he's on dried frog pills. Well, he runs out of dried frog pills, and one of them goes a little balmy and somehow infects Hex with it. So now Hex has gone a bit balmy, and that had some odd messages. I was thinking, I can't say that at this point. It has some odd messages come out of Hex in that entry, because he becomes his own character. He becomes sentient, ultimately, Hex. And so, and that's something that Terry plays with a fair bit about sentience, and it comes back to his big themes: is
Wow.
at what level does sentience equal person, and at what point is a person the same as me and you? So we get into the whole social rights thing, and he can't help himself. Derri, there's always something much more serious to say.
Well, it's interesting too, because he often, like in the first two books, The Color of Magic, fantastic. Yes. You have this tourist, right, who is an outsider, and it's so often the outsiders that see things that we who are inside don't see very well, and so you have he's a kind of a naive character, but nevertheless perceives things that we don't perceive necessarily. So I hope the tourist comes back. I kind of liked him.
You do get Two Flower again. He does come back.
Okay.
So yes, you will see him again. The patrician has changed a little. Oh, you met the real patrician in Guards Guards. So
I did in Guards Guards. Yeah.
He's a marvelous character. The interactions with Vimes and the patrician are among my favorites.
Yeah, even in Guards Guards. Yeah.
Yeah. He gets a different foil, the patrician, in the later books when we get introduced to Moist von Lipwig.
Oh, okay.
Because when you write a series of 41 books, you've got a fairly big cast of characters. So of course you're going to introduce some new ones in book 32.
Yeah.
And we get an entirely new cast of characters. And Moist von Lipwig is a con man. He is a swindler of the highest degree. And the patrician puts him in charge of the post office. And we got going postal. The interactions between the patrician and Moist, I think, are more entertaining than the ones we get between Vimes and the patrician.
Wow.
Because Moist thinks as corkscrewy as the patrician. Okay. So trying to make sense of their conversations is a lot of fun, because they're each trying to outplay the other, and it makes for some truly entertaining discussions.
Oh my goodness, this is wonderful. Yeah, you're giving me great, and you're doing a marvelous job of avoiding spoilers too. I can see where you're thinking around, how can I explain this without a spoiler? You're doing a marvelous job, so I appreciate it a lot.
It does help that his characters are really the heart of it, because knowing about a character isn't a spoiler. And it's, for all that it's fantasy, it's also a very positive fantasy. Like, telling you this now is not going to spoil the series. Everything works out fine.
Yeah.
There is a happy ending at the end of all the books. None of them build on each other. They all have their own internal plot, with the exception of the first two. They all have their own internal plot. You don't have to read them in order, because they all work as independent stories. The only reason you would read them in order, and people do read them in order, is the characters evolve through the stories. Yeah. But the stories aren't connected. The characters are. Yeah. And so to talk about the characters isn't spoiling any of the stories.
Yeah.
Because they're separate. And that makes it a really... It troubles me that people see it as a daunting series when it's anything but. It is absolutely the opposite. It's got to be one of the easiest series in fantasy to get into, because it doesn't matter where you start.
Right. And it's also, as you say, I think there's a kind of lightheartedness to it, though there are many serious themes and points to it, but there is a lightheartedness I sense that runs through it, which is interesting, because I got my love of fantasy from my father, who had fantasy books on the shelves, and that's where I started reading fantasy. And he loves, in later years, he picked up Discworld. And so I wasn't around when he started reading Discworld, but he loves, he's actually stopped reading fantasy for the most part, because he says it's just too painful. There's enough pain in the world. And he doesn't want to read about pain anymore and suffering. And there is a lot of it in a lot of fantasy, but he can still read Discworld. He loves reading Discworld. And I think his favorite is actually the witch books. He loves the witches. So yeah,
a lot of it is, what do you know and what are you familiar with? And
yeah,
I totally understand why The Watch is Alan's favorite series.
Yeah.
The Witches are my favorite series because I connect with very British history and myth and legend and fairy tales.
Yeah.
Other people adore the Death books because they like that philosophical bent and they want to think these existential thoughts. And there's something there for everybody.
Yeah.
There really is.
Interesting.
So
do you
love
know
that your dad loves them.
Oh, he's a huge fan. So that's another reason why I need to read more of them. So I have more books to talk with him about. But do you know where Terry Pratchett, what part of the UK he lived in and was from? Do you know his biography?
I it's information that's in my head somewhere, but I can't think of it right now.
Okay.
I think there's a similarity almost with Sir Terry and Tolkien, I think. And you get it in The Witches, where he's almost saying farewell to the sort of rural village life of his youth, where you didn't have a car and you didn't have running water, and you did need to know about how far away your privy needed to be from the well.
Yeah,
these very basic things.
Right.
And I think he felt quite sad about the loss of that, and he talks about that to some degree in the Witches books, as more things are even in Discworld, they're learning about germs, and the witches trying to convince rural folk of the need to wash their hands and not have their privy so close to the well because of germs.
Interesting.
And the difficulty of pushing that information where it isn't necessarily welcome right now.
Yeah. Interesting. So, I also asked because his name, although I think he was English, but his name is Welsh. Pratchett is a Welsh name. And you mentioned the Wales up there. His name is Pratchett is a very Welsh name. It was Ap Richard, which is son of Richard, and it became Pratchett. And that's and Pritchard is another version of that. But yeah, his name is Welsh, so I wondered if he does indeed have a connection to Wales or not. But
it wouldn't surprise me at all. I think because, and again, you will find this when you read the Witches books in particular. There is a very strong sense of countries, of British countryside in the Witches. And for the older Witches, the first half of the Witches books, they're in the mountains. They're in this mountainous regions where you have dwarves and you have trolls and there are mines, and it is very Welsh. At the same time, as the books move later down into the Tiffany stories, and he moves down to the uplands on the chalk, he's referencing the Shropshire horse, and he's referencing the giant man, the giant chalk man, who very clearly has no pants.
Well, the actual one that you go by also has no pants.
Has no pants.
And he's giant everywhere. No, he's giant everywhere too. So
he leans into that sense of old magic, so old it isn't magic anymore.
Neat.
So Nanny Og is a practitioner of that sort of magic, a very old magic, very people-based magic, beliefs in fertility, beliefs in the seasons. You get references to May Day and solstices. You're really going to like the Witch series.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I spent some time in Wales and I learned.
I remember you saying.
Yeah, so
I only remember my 1 to 10 in Welsh, and because I lived in Wales for a while when I was little.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I was thinking about it the first time that you said that you knew Welsh. I was thinking, I learned Welsh, and I was thinking, I don't remember any of it.
Yeah.
Not like I use it every day, so.
It's hard. Yeah, even I'm extremely rusty myself right now, but it's a beautiful language and I still admire it very much. Yeah.
But it requires different things of your face and the muscles in your throat and the
Oh,
way
yeah.
your tongue has to fold to make the sounds.
Yeah.
And so it's, if you're not using it, it's incredibly easy to lose that ability.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, the double L's and everything. Yeah, they can be pretty tricky. And I love the R's. I can roll my R's, so I have a good time with those.
Yes.
But yeah, so you spent time in Wales. Were you born in New Zealand then, or were you born?
No, I was born in the UK. I was born in the UK,
Okay.
and I lived there until I was almost 7, and my family moved to New Zealand. But I still have family in the UK, so I have visited a few times since.
Okay.
And I, as a kid coming from the UK, and we moved around a lot in New Zealand, that became my identity. I was the kid from England. So I kind of held on to a lot of it for a long time as a core piece of who I was. And I mean, that's kind of stuck with me. I like English humor. I like English television. I like English music. So it's definitely stuck with me.
So you said mentioned Wales, and obviously you spent time in England as well. What parts of England?
We lived in a few places. I don't remember very many. I was born in Nottingham. I know we spent time in Shrewsbury. Spent time in Cheltenham. And I think ultimately we must have ended up somewhere in, I'm just trying to think, Essex, I think we ended up in.
Oh, so you did go south as well. Okay.
Yeah, because most of my family from my father's side is sort of near, sort of closer to London than not.
Oh, okay.
And so when I visit, I don't have to really go too far.
So you
But
lived
when I visit my mum's family, I have to go further north.
Okay, so that's the connection to the north then. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Neat. Wow. Yeah, I love all parts myself.
Yeah.
So I would love to explore more of the north. I've been all over the south, but I've been to York mostly in the north, which is an amazing place.
So much history.
Yeah. Well, you know me, I love my Vikings and all that stuff. So
I do.
York was a natural fit for me.
I know. Yeah, I imagine you spent a good bit of time there.
I did. I loved it. Yeah, it was a wonderful visit. But yeah. So yeah,
it's the buildings that have been there for 1,000 years that kind of blow the mind, where you're like, wow, this piece of stone has been worn into this dip where people have been coming through this doorway for centuries.
Yeah,
that always is astonishing. And then you see that I'm thinking of pubs because I've been in old pubs, and you get the ceiling joists that are blackened with smoke and soot, and because it's just been absorbing it for centuries. And it does make you feel a bit ephemeral.
Yeah.
we could be gone in a heartbeat, but this building is still going to be here.
Yeah. Well, it makes you feel, I think it makes you feel definitely ephemeral, but also part of something bigger than yourself, which is kind of cool, actually. I really enjoy that sense of, that's one of the things I think I love about parts of the world where, and of course, you know, I'm from the United States and you live in New Zealand, and of course people were inhabiting these places way back, but the modern cities that exist around here, I live not far from New York City. It's a great city. You know, there's a lot to it that I love, but it doesn't have the same number of layers that, say, London has, you know, where you can see parts of the Roman wall there, you know, and it's a different scale when it comes to layers and layers of the past, which I have always, even as a kid, I was attracted to this notion of the people who came before us and how we're connected to them, how we come from them. That's
and that connection to the past is cultural, and you see it in how quickly change will happen. Society is taking a long time to shift in Britain because there is this, it's in the air. You're living somewhere that your family has lived for centuries. You know, not just the last couple of 100 years. Centuries properly. You know, there were people that you are related to that were here before forges. So it does make change that much harder, just in general. Whereas you come to somewhere that only has recorded history going back a couple of 100 years, and there isn't that same sense of connection to the land or to, important stands of growth. And so it doesn't have as much importance. And it's where you tend to see around the world where colonization has happened, the insult done to Indigenous peoples, where there hasn't been that respect for important places.
Yes.
And
that's a very good point. Yeah, I can still hear you though. But that's an excellent point. And take your time. There you are.
But it's. I notice it in New Zealand because this was the only country colonized by agreement. It's been a poorly enacted agreement, and it's certainly done the local people harm.
Yeah.
But I think less harm than in a lot of places around the world.
Interesting.
But we're very conscious of it here. That subsequent generations have gone, oh, we were supposed to look after that and we didn't. Sorry.
Yeah.
How do we fix it?
Yeah, I mean, the relationship
being made here to hang on to it.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, we obviously here in the States, there's a very fraught history. And there's a history of exploitation and genocide, and
it's horrifying.
It's really horrifying. But I feel like, I wish I knew more about the history and what existed before European contact there. I know precious little. I mean, I love the film Whale Rider.
Yay!
Yeah, I mean, that's a great film.
It is a brilliant film. It's a lovely book.
Oh, okay, I had not read the book. Yeah.
It's only very little. It's like tiny wee. It's a lovely book.
Okay. Yeah, the film was great. I was very moved by that film. And I think you do get some sense of some dislocation of the Maori culture and all that. So, but
there's a lot. There's people. There are. I mean, obviously, in any culture, you have people on all ends in all areas of the spectrum.
Yeah.
But there's certainly a lot of people here who are trying really hard to save what remains and regrow as much of it as possible. We're getting more immersion classes in school where the Māori language is spoken throughout, where the Māori legends are taught. We now have our public holiday celebrating the Māori New Year that started literally just this year. That's Matariki, and it's based on a constellation of stars at a certain point of the year.
Okay.
So we're starting to sort of welcome that cultural information back into mainstream.
Yeah.
And I think it's marvelous because it comes back to stories.
Yeah.
We're getting this culture stories as part of the Kiwi lexicon. And I think that that's really important. And I think that's where the Native Americans have so much to offer, because I'm certain they have a really rich cultural heritage of stories that are important to that specific place on the globe where they have lived and are important about that place. And that's where you get that sense of history. That's where you get your connection to where you live.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is something that we as maybe I'm sure all sorts of people connect with this, but I feel like people who love fantasy would naturally connect with this sort of thing. I think the sense of belonging, the sense of place, the sense of history and layers and respect for the past, respect for the people who came before, and what we can learn from them. I feel like that's something that we fantasy lovers could get to, right?
Well, yes, I think so. I mean, hey, we're both fantasy lovers and we both see the value of fantasy. For me, it's the stories so often are about lost knowledge and about lost traditions that suddenly leave a people powerless or at risk. And that's not so different really from the real world.
Right.
You know, how much has it been? Oh, we didn't know. Actually, we did. You just weren't paying attention. You know?
Yeah.
What if only we'd known, if only we'd done that differently. Look at your history. There's a very, very, very good chance somebody has tried it already. And there's a reason we stopped doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the reverse is also true. And I'm sure Alan would be able to tell you about things like Roman concrete.
Yeah.
And we lost the ability to make that. And it still stands now.
Yeah.
Clearly, it was superior.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we forgot how.
Yeah.
So keeping knowledge, and in literate times, it was oral. You have to listen to stories. You have to pay attention. The information is there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And fantasy is that still. It's telling stories. We're going to put important information in a story because stories are way more fun to listen to than a textbook, and you'll get the information.
Yeah.
Why do we tell our children fairy tales?
Yeah.
Because we want them to be good people. You can't teach them how to be good using a textbook. You can only teach children how to be good by using fairy tales. And look, good people win. Good people help other people, and those other people, because you were good to them, give you what you need to win.
Yeah.
Fairy tales do that.
That's right. If you want to influence people, don't tell them what to do. Tell them a good story. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think that that theme we were talking about earlier, life's fleetingness, that's something that just, it comes up everywhere in fantasy. And for me, as a medievalist, it's the uber theme of Old English poetry, really, and it's the absolute spirit of Beowulf, for example, is really it's a lament for the past. It's a lament for the past and the layers, the people who came before, and how they struggled to make meaning in this moment of life, in this moment of light, and how we are very much, when we look across the centuries, we see reflections of ourselves.
Absolutely. And why wouldn't we? We haven't evolved to be significantly different.
Right.
Those people were as clever as everybody we know now is. They're as likely to make breakthroughs. They are either as well or poorly spoken. They are as subject to moods as we are. They're the same. They just don't have French fries and air conditioning. But they're the same. They're exactly the same as us. They want the same things. They want safety for themselves, for their families. They love the people around them the same as we do. They're the same. Their stories are as valid to us as they are to them. We just have to allow for the shift in language. The story is still valid.
Yeah. I appreciate that you said French fries rather than chips for me. So yeah.
Well, I have to, because I'm English enough that chips are chips, hot chips.
Right.
But New Zealand has, and even in the time I've been here, has become far more Americanized than the culture from England. So even here now, you're as likely to find fries on a menu as you are chips.
Really?
And they're not called crisps here, they're chips here.
Oh, really?
In the UK, it's crisps.
Crisps, yeah.
And in the US, they're chips. So we've got a delightful blend of both here.
It sounds like you do. Yeah. I guess I just assumed that in New Zealand that you would have favored the British way of talking about
in many, many ways. And it's fairly recent, the Americanism, and it comes with media. It's come with channel cable TV. We don't have cable TV here, but when cable TV happened in the States, suddenly there's that much more programming. And if it's, where do you buy your programming from? We aren't limited to either market, so our program is bought from both. And
well, 3 cheers for Coca colonialism. Yeah.
Absolutely. We have them to thank for Santa.
Yay. Wow. Well, I really appreciate your explanation of the Discworld, various series within Discworld, and you've got me more excited than ever to delve into those books. But we also, I hope you don't mind me switching gears, and I would also like to talk to you about Realm of the Elderlings, another series that is near and dear to you, and the other one that you tend to talk about a lot on your channel. And if you don't mind, also, let's talk a little bit about why you call your channel Derri's Read It Before, and
Yes.
and why these two series are so important. And you have read other series as well, but you have a special reason for focusing on these series, don't you?
I do. I had a stroke just over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And between that and my mental health issues, I suffer with depression as well.
Mm-hmm.
The two of them together kind of formed this mutated thing and pretty much just stopped my ability to create new worlds in my head.
Huh.
And fantasy I tried reading in the years subsequent just fell out. It just wouldn't stick.
Huh.
I know I have read Name of the Wind.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you anything about it at all. I couldn't even give you a character name. It's gone. It just wouldn't stick. Yeah. So I stopped trying because the worlds wouldn't stick. So I had to go with worlds I already had. So I began to just reread. And the cream rises to the top when you reread.
Yeah.
Things that aren't great don't hold up at all. Realm of the Elderlings holds up. Oh, yeah. And I've been reading that on rotation. I haven't stopped reading Realm of the Elderlings pretty much since 2001 when I first started reading them.
Okay.
And I've just reread and reread and reread. And the rereading just never got a break after my stroke. It literally, I would finish the last one and just roll straight through into the next.
Wow. So it's obviously a very special series for you for that reason as well.
It has held up incredibly well. I still find new things.
Oh, I believe it.
Admittedly, this I've just started this iteration of reading. I'm in Royal Assassin again at the moment.
Okay.
But this is the first time from the beginning since I've been involved and aware of BookTube, and the insights that I have received from other people who have read the series, and I've kind of tried to sort of help people who are going, hi, what's going on? And yourself and AP, and I'm seeing so much more in this reread where I'm really good with the story. I know this story inside, outside, everything around the edges that you don't notice when you're chasing the plot.
Yeah. This
is the first time I'm noticing the writing, where I'm actually being aware of word usage and sentence length and all of these fabulous things. And when I first picked up Assassin's Apprentice last month, in the first 10 pages, I was like, oh my God, I knew you were brilliant. But this is astonishing. The amount of information that you get in the first 10 pages blew my mind.
Wow.
And I know what's in the whole series. Yeah. So to be able to see how she gives you information that isn't going to be important until later, that you don't know you're being given, it's astonished me.
Wow.
And it because I've read it. I mean, this is not the normal reading experience for people who are reading Realm of the Elderlings, and I acknowledge that.
Yeah.
So I have to try and really force myself to remember not everybody has read this more than once. So yes, people aren't going to have seen all of these connections. So I can argue the point until I'm blue in the face that no, you had that information, but I have to accept that you can miss it. Yeah. And it means that things will come later that will seem to come out of the blue and will seem to make something else irrelevant because you didn't catch everything. I'm here to tell you, if that happens, you're wrong. You read it wrong. You just read it wrong because the information was there.
Oh dear.
And it just gives me faith, really, that it's going to be very few people who read Realm of the Elderlings and don't take something away from it.
Yeah.
Particularly the first 3 trilogies. that was initially going to be the entire series. So it does end particularly well at the end of Tawny Man.
Tawny Man, okay. Yeah.
And it means, and this is why I think the Rainwild Chronicles get such a bad reputation, because you're going from a 9-book climax, you know, there's an awful lot that's gone into that ending, to, oh, we've got to start again because there's more story here. And we've got to rebuild with new characters, and we've got to start again. And so it just is a big drop after Tawny Man back to that beginning kind of feeling.
Well, I know that people, if I could interrupt for just a second,
please
I know
do.
Tawny Man picks up from Farseer at some point, right? There's a connection. I know
there's a big
later
gap.
on. Yeah. There's a gap.
Yeah, there's a big gap.
Whereas
there's 7 years between Farseer and Live Ships, but between Farseer and Tawny Man are 15. So and I think that works because it gives people a break between the trilogies. And when you come back, it doesn't feel like you were interrupted, because there's been this big gap in Fitz's life. So it feels okay to come back much later.
So
because he'll catch you up a bit.
I always assumed that the Rainwild Chronicles then are a kind of sequel to Live Ship Traders, but not so much, or am I?
Kind of, not as directly as Tawny Man is from Farseer, but it is in the same region, and it is very reliant on events from Live Ships. Some of the characters do come back, but not until later in the series. So those first 2 books, which should have been 1, by the way, which is why they read terribly, have new people. They're all new people. Nobody you've met before. In the first 2 of the Rainwild series. And they also were published in the window between the Hunger Games books and the Hunger Games movies, when YA suddenly became a thing. So the publishers have clearly gone, give us some young people. But they got YA by Robin Hobb. So
I mean, I feel like
dissonance there.
the Rainwild Chronicles are almost universally the least favorite of most fans of the realm of the Elderlings. Is that fair, or am I mischaracterizing that?
Well, it is fair in that it's not the strongest part of Realm of the Elderlings. I think where it becomes not fair is in saying it's not good.
Right.
Because it is good.
In comparison,
it's just not as good as the rest.
I mean, I figure just from reading the first 2 trilogies, you know, Farseer and Live Ship, a bad Robin Hobb book is still going to be better than most people's best book. So it's
and she very much made a rod for her own back with showing how exceptionally she could end a series. In Tawny Man, only to then go into Rainwilds, where she had to start again. And I think it's the comparison between that final book and the Tawny Man that is exceptional. It's an exceptional book. Into a pretty good first book of a new series. It's pretty good. But when you come to it after exceptional, it's going to feel worse than it actually is.
And what about that final trilogy? The final trilogy of the
final trilogy. I've recently heard.
I've heard a lot of praise
at Nico's book reviews.
Yeah, I know. Nico.
I used up my Discord characters limit twice, responding to Nico's criticism of Assassin's Fate. But I think for me, the final trilogy is wrapping up everything that came before, and what some people will see as fan service, I have always read as we actually have a lot of chapters to close. So we need to close those chapters, and we need to put Fitz in a position to see where all of those decisions he made 15 books ago, where all of those decisions led. So while it can come across as fan service, I've never seen it as that. I've always seen it as a very necessary part of the story for Fitz to see. because he's very separate to the events in Live Ships and the events in Rainwild Chronicles, even though it's his actions in Farseer and in Tawnyman that create the situations in those areas of the world. So Fitz and the Fool bring all of that together, and Fitz sees the impact that his choices and the actions that his decisions caused. He sees the flow-on effect of the things that he caused. And I find that to be important. And because the relationship of Fitz and the Fool is the heart of the entire series, focusing on that relationship in that final trilogy is key.
So interesting, you know, and I feel like I already know this Fitz in a way because the narrator of the Farseer trilogy is a much older Fitz who has been through. I mean, you just get the sense in that voice of this guy has been through a lot, you know, and the aches and the pains, both physical and emotional, are just so tremendous. And so I feel like I want to get to know this guy, this older Fitz, and I'm going to meet him in these later trilogies. So I'm really looking forward to that, having read the initial trilogy and gotten to know him both as a young fella, but also I feel like I've kind of gotten a glimpse into this older Fitz too, because he is the narrator of the original trilogy. And I know that he's not always going to be the narrator. I think later there is another character who is a narrator in one of the Fitz trilogies, right? Am I correct on that?
In the final trilogy, we do get a new POV. And within the Fitz books, that's very new. And I remember when it was published, because I'd begun reading and rereading before it all got published. And I remember when I first read Fool's Assassin, just about falling out of my chair. Like, whoa.
Who's this?
What the? And I wasn't sure how I felt about that. And it took a couple of chapters from this other POV. And I remember thinking, this could have gone horribly wrong. You know, that's a brave decision for an author to make this deep in a series about a character so beloved, to change something so fundamental to how it's written. But it paid off, I think. And not every reader will agree with me. They're wrong. but it worked, and it was a big risk, and I think it paid off. And it, for the first time, gives us an in-story look of Fitz externally, because we don't get that. We we see people's reactions to Fitz, but we never hear their thoughts. We never see really what Fitz looks like from the outside. So to finally get that is wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
Speaking of narrative perspective, it's interesting how there are differences for me with these first two trilogies, the ones I've actually read, where I came at Realm of the Elderlings having heard it's one of the greatest series ever, and thought I was trying to expand my fantasy reading and read more great series. And I read Farseer and I loved it. I thought it was great. And even then I was like, this is for me, you know, she became, I didn't rank my fantasy authors in those days, but you know, even when I started BookTube, that was all I had read. I had read the Farseer trilogy before starting a channel. And for me, Robin Hobb was already close to top 10. It was, you know, probably top 15, I can say for sure. I even made a video on the Farseer trilogy when I was starting my channel. I made a series of videos why blank is among the best fantasy, right? And I included the Farseer trilogy among those videos. And then I read Live Ship Traders, and it just blew me away. And it was just, okay, now I get it. And Hobb went from close to top 10 to top 3 for me.
Easy,
like that with Live Ship Traders, and it just blew me away. And I think part of it was, now don't get me wrong, because I love Fitz from Farseer. I love Fitz, probably the most beloved character, I think, easily, right? And unless it's maybe Night Eyes in all of the realm of the Elderlings. But I do feel like Live Ship Traders gave me more characters that were more richly sketched, more deeply developed than Farseer, and that has to do with narrative perspective. Obviously, it's first person in Farseer, whereas it's third person, and there are multiple POVs in Live Ship. And I just thought it was so richly done, and there were so many. I got to know Althea. I got to know. I got to know Kenneth. I got to know Wintro. I got to know all these, an array of characters, and that just absolutely. I mean, it's one thing to pull off one really great character, but so many that are just so convincing, and they feel like people and it's just
not just the human characters.
Yeah, that's right.
We're not only getting three-dimensional characters who all have unique motivation that you understand with all of them. You also meet the ships who have unique personalities and have backstories that you care about.
Yeah. And
you get the serpents who feel very odd at the beginning, and you just have to trust that Hobbs put them there for a reason and go, okay, I will pay attention. I don't know why I'm paying attention, but I'm paying attention.
Yeah.
But they have characters and they have motivations, and how everybody's differing driving forces culminate in the events that happen does blow you away, because it is masterfully done.
Yeah.
The characters are all believable. The broken characters are believable.
Yeah.
The nasty characters are believable.
Yeah.
There's conflict in you as the reader, because some characters are awful, but are doing good things. Some characters are lovely, but are just making mistakes all the time. So to build these relationships with the reader as well as she does is uncanny.
Yeah,
it's masterful.
It is.
One thing
I
will say is there isn't a main POV in Live Ships.
Right.
And the Live Ships is very much a story about a point in time that we need to know about and what goes into it and all of the things that happen. And the characters are simply the way we see that event, those events. So, because I was in a part of a discussion a while ago now, and a reader was quite upset that Althea, who this person felt was the main POV, didn't get her motivation dealt with in Live Ships. And I tried really hard to sort of say, that wasn't the point. That wasn't the backbone of the story.
Right. Interesting.
Because character growth happened, and what people wanted at the beginning and want at the beginning of Live Ships just isn't the situation at the end of Live Ships. That so many things have happened to everybody involved that that initial driving force behind some characters doesn't exist anymore.
kind of like life, isn't it, really?
Yeah, that's right. You go in thinking you want something, and that's just not how it goes. But Hobb does, and for me that was totally believable. That people have to make adjustments, and okay, that's not possible. How do I deal with that? And like real people, Hobb has them react in very different ways.
It's so wonderful. And like you said, the array of characters, all of them have such depth to them. And that was a difference for me. I felt like the baddies, if we can call them that, in Live Ship, were much more interesting to me than the baddies in Farseer. And they weren't, not that they were horrible or badly done. It's just that they're much more fleshed out in Live Ship, because you have multiple POVs and it's third person narration, whereas Fitz is telling his story from his perspective. And so you don't see the baddies' motivations and their background and how they were, punished when they were little kids for stealing cookies or whatever, so you don't get that. So that's a difference for me. But what Hobb does, I think, just so beautifully, in all of the two series that I've read so far, in all the books, is the relationships between the characters.
Oh,
this
yes.
is something that distinguishes her from, I think, most other writers, period, is that a lot of people are good character writers, but Hobb is a great character writer, and she does these relationships so well. For example, Fitz and Patience,
That was exactly the relationship I was thinking of.
I mean, it's just, I get a little choked up even thinking about it, even mentioning
it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful relationship.
Yeah.
Because it begins so awkwardly and there's so much baggage attached to it.
Yeah.
But Hobb she's a genius. You're never going to hear me say anything different. She writes that relationship with such poignancy because both of them really want something from that relationship.
Yeah.
And neither of them can have what they want out of that relationship. So there's this yearning for it while they're both holding back from it. And at the same time, she's got a relationship that Fitz has with Burke, which is a very different relationship and sounds different. They react to each other differently. They speak to each other differently. And Fitz also has a relationship with Shade, who again is interacting differently with and speaks differently too, which is very true to life. We all deal with the people in our lives differently.
Yeah.
And she does this with such class because it evolves. Even as she's maintaining these relationships, each relationship also evolves.
Yep.
Fitz dealing with Burke as a young man as a boy is different to how he relates to Burke as a young man, is different to how he will relate to Burke later.
Yeah.
And to maintain everybody's characters at the right levels for that to stay believable. Yeah. Because everybody's changing. Everybody's getting older. Everybody has more things happening to them. And to maintain that accurately at all stages, it's amazing. Talent.
It really is. Yeah.
It's talent.
Because we are different when we're around different people. That's so true.
Yeah.
I'm different at work than I am at home. And different when I'm playing tennis or when I'm, in other settings. That's the nature of a human person, right? I mean, we are different around different people, and as you say, we evolve and our relationships evolve. And Hobb somehow captures all that in these books.
She really does.
Astounding.
She also manages the awkwardness when you have worlds overlap. When you go to a work function and you've got just normal friends around, there's that awkwardness of which you to be.
Yeah.
Are you going to be work me or friend me?
Yeah.
And there is that awkwardness. And she does that well for Fitz, because every now and then his worlds do overlap. And you see him having to go, I have to do this, but I can't be this around that person.
Right.
And you see his struggle with that. And that continues for all of the characters. I mean, you see it in Live Ships with Malta.
Oh my goodness. I think, I started Live Ships really having a hard time during her POV portions and just thinking,
everybody
I don't like spending time with this person, to really evolving with that.
She reminds me of Scarlett O'Hara.
Sure. Yeah.
She really reminds me of Scarlett O'Hara.
That's a great comparison, actually. Yeah.
This spoiled little rich girl that's never actually had to use her brain, despite actually being really clever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when she finally gets an avenue where she needs to think and she has to really work at something.
Yeah.
The capacity is there. And like Scarlett O'Hara, she kind of grabs life by the things she needs to grab and go for it. And she becomes quite admirable for that. At the same time as not losing that edge that made her unpleasant,
right?
But changes into fearsomeness almost as she evolves. So Malta is almost always the character used to prove Robin Hobb's character writing, that she can believably evolve this character from being just want to shake the living daylights out of this girl,
to
being like, that was class. But what doesn't get looked at as often is Wintro. Wintro often begins the trilogy as readers' favorite character. He's this lovely young boy, he's lovely. And as the trilogy progresses, he kind of dwindles in your estimation as a person. Again, very believably, his arc is as believable as Malta's. And that doesn't get as much attention. And I think it's because the writing is so good. We blame another character for it, rather than going, no, the writer did that. We blame Kennett for what happens to Wintro.
Right.
Instead of going, Hobb is actually a genius to have created that arc, and had you blame someone else.
It's great. I mean, I always felt like Wintro does go through the ringer, though, and then maybe he and Fitz ought to have formed a support group or something. But just recently, in the last couple of days or so, I mentioned to somebody, Burrick has probably as hard a life as Fitz. And as you get to know his backstory and so many more of the things that he goes through, he is remarkably well formed. Again, I have and it is an advantage. I can go back and see it because I've read it so often. Right.
He's fully formed from the first page. All of the things you learn later are present in his character when you meet him. And his reactions are true to those things you learn later. His behaviors, his choices, all of them are accurate to a backstory that you don't learn for some time.
Well, you can already see, though, in Farseer, and this is without me having read further, but you can see in Farseer how much of what Burrick wants for Fitz is a result of what he himself has been through. That is strongly hinted at, and his stance toward Fitz and who Fitz is and what he could be is very much informed by. And you get a sense of, okay, he's been through something here, and that's why he's acting this way. So, and I'm pleased to hear that. I'm going to get some more details about that later in one of the subsequent villages.
And we talk about Hobb's character work. Something else to think about, and you'll become more aware of it as you move through, is the themes in her work are really strong, and particularly in family relationships and family dynamics, particularly obviously in a story about Fitz, who is this orphan boy, around fathers and sons and repeating behaviors and cycles of behavior, and how in trying to prevent it, you're causing it. And the ongoing theme of men raising other men's boys and the difficulties of that. And she does it with such a gentle touch that it never feels like you're being browbeaten with it. And yet it's there. You don't have to hunt for it. It's clearly there. You can look at it, you can explore it, you can talk about it from all sorts of directions. And it never feels preachy. And in the same storyline, you're also getting themes around agency and self-reliance and the ability to trust because of broken relationships. And live ships particularly goes into trauma. Everybody's dealing with trauma in live ships of one form or another. And everybody's reacting differently, but everybody's reacting honestly. These are all logical, accepted behaviors that people show after trauma. And
some of them are more self-destructive than others.
They are. But again, they're all real. All of these things happen in real life. And some of the events in live ships particularly can be quite triggering. Again, Hobb deals with them with an honesty and a truthfulness that somehow manages to avoid being there's a word, it'll come to me later.
Mm-hmm.
It's not there for the sake of it. It's not for shock value. It's not.
Oh goodness, no. Yeah, I mean, she's so good
it's never
about
there for that.
Yeah, she's so good about following up on. You can tell that she's much more interested in what led to this event and what are the effects of this event on the characters. That's what it's about. That's what it's about. And it's important for art and literature and music to explore these kinds of things. I really believe that. It's not that every writer has to do that, not every book has to do that, but it is an important thing that literature can explore, and Hobb does a very sensitive, very thorough job of following up on these things where you can tell this is not titillating, or it's not voyeuristic or anything, like, not even close. It's really what are the experiences, what are things that people go through, and what effects do these things have on us, and how do we deal with these things? So
and
very
lasting effects. I think what Hobb does well. A long time ago, somebody made a criticism that there were very few women in Farseer. And my response to that was, it's not that there aren't very many women in Farseer, it's that Hobb chose to not have very many women in Farseer. And as Fitz ages through the entire series, you see the impact that has on him and his relationships with women. Everything that Fitz goes through in Farseer profoundly impacts who he is as a person. He hasn't had women as role models in his life. And it shows every time he then interacts with women for the rest of his life. It's a deliberate choice. It is part of who has formed him, what has formed him as a character. And Hobb does that with everybody and everything. None of the events that happen to them are shaken off. They're always remembered, they're always reacted to, and they always inform later decisions. Which is far more true to real life than most fantasy, where something traumatic happens, we have a change of heart, or we have an impacted decision, and then it's never mentioned again.
Right, that's right.
These are fundamental aspects to her characters, and she second to none, in my opinion.
Oh, I agree. I have to agree with you there. And you mentioned how there are some amazing father figures, and fatherhood is explored there. There are some pretty good mother figures too. I would say there's Patience, but also in Live Ship, at least
you have wonderful ones.
You have the matron of the Vestrit family, who is just one of my favorite characters, actually.
I love Veronica.
I love her arc. And she's just a not somebody with a lot of necessarily physical power or presence, but a lot of fortitude and determination, and just an admirable character who does whatever she can for her family in the circumstances that she finds herself in. So just a beautifully sketched character. Kefria
for me was that in Live Ships, because Kefria, and you see her being she self-identifies with labels. She's a mother, she's a daughter, she's a sister, and you see her evolve as the trilogy progresses into finding out who she is.
She really needs to find herself. And
I think that definition of womanhood in Live Ships is a big deal. Again, with the themes, none of them are heavy-handed, but they're all there.
So
if you want to talk about them, they're there to talk about.
Kefria really does define herself in relation to other people, and therefore doesn't seem to really know who she is. Doesn't have the same backbone that Althea has, for example, or their mother.
And again, it's true. It feels true because she never left home. She married and had children, but she remained in her mother's home. So she remained a daughter, second to her mother. She didn't have to make the decisions that a mother in her own home would. So not having this sense of self reads very true. She doesn't feel weak. She doesn't feel like she's nothing. But the fact that she doesn't make active decisions feels logical because it's not her home to make the decisions in. It's her mother's home. So I just, flawless.
It also doesn't
Anyone
help.
picking holes in Hobb is wrong.
It also doesn't help.
I can find proof.
When you think about who she's married to, but we don't have to get to that unpleasantness. No. So yeah.
Even that's true. Somebody was saying, how could he have gone so long without them realizing? And my answer to that, as someone who had a traumatized childhood, was people who have that in them know it's inappropriate and wait until they can get away with it to start showing those behaviors.
Yeah, give someone a little bit of power and
and that's when they take the mile. And he didn't get that power for a long time. And the minute he did, he took advantage of it. And that's when everyone goes, oh, actually, the signs were there, but you don't know to look for them until that behavior starts showing. And so, she's just an incredible observer of human nature, and she's able to put that on paper, which is, it's a genuine talent. It really is.
Wow.
Yeah, she's amazing.
She's amazing. Well, I made you talk about 2 series for a long time. Are there any series?
We barely scratched the surface on either one.
I know, but I think you've done a brilliant job. But are there any series, any other books or series that you would like to bring up while we're together?
Well, I'm a bit, saddened isn't the word, because Janny Wurts is absolutely a reader an author you should read.
Yeah,
I'm a little saddened that I have to wait so long before you get to the Empire trilogy, which is my other favorite series that I've reread
with Raymond Feist
times.
Yeah,
and I love it. I think it's aged remarkably well, because unlike a lot of fantasy from the same time, it isn't based in a Western setting. It's based on the other world that's part of the Rift War saga that Raymond Feist writes.
Right.
But it has a very, I want to say Japanese. I mean, it's not just Japanese flavored, but it's very strongly Japanese flavored.
Yeah.
And a young girl, literally moments away from swearing herself into a religious order, becomes the ruling lady of a house.
Myra.
And she has nothing. She's got almost no people left. She doesn't know what she's doing. She wasn't brought up for this. In an amazingly patriarchal society, this young girl has to somehow save her family. And the politics in the trilogy are amazing. Like there are actual risks here. This could be deadly. She is at risk many times, and you feel it as the reader.
Yeah.
The politics in it is amazing. There are long, far-ranging plots in place from other characters that you don't even know about yet, that are already happening. She starts putting things in place to affect over a long term, and so things that change that. Very well written, very well characterized. The spying, top-notch. We have spies and spy masters. It's all very fabulous. But there's also proper full-scale war where, we're just two armies lined up against each other across a field. You've got a huge desert campaign that lasts for 2 or 3 years that she's part of. So it's this grand scope of things with big stakes.
Sounds marvelous.
Just written wonderfully.
So, I have read Raymond Feist's Magician. That's as far as I've gotten in the Rift War stuff. But I think you can read the Empire trilogy without having read all the other Rift War material, from what I've heard. So I will definitely pick it up. I recently read To Ride Hell's Chasm by Janny Wurts.
Yes, I saw that you had the show with Joanna, and Wurts is another wordsmith. That just deals with a different world, basically, than Terry Pratchett. It's a different level. There's a richness to the language she likes to use. And again, we're readers, we like words. Words are great.
Right.
And it's like well fertilized soil. When there's rich words, you just get so much better from it. You get more from it. You good fertilized words, good fertilized prose. It gives you a really lush story in the end. And
oh my goodness, I can see that even from that standalone to Ride Hell's Chasm, and I'm so looking forward to. Actually, I'm just about there. I'm finishing up the last Malazan book. I've finished.
Wow, well done.
I'm done pretty much. I mean, I finished Stephen Erickson's the 10th book and the Malazan Book of the Fallen. So I finished my reread of The Crippled God, and now I'm just about finished with the last book in Ian Esselmont's Novels of the Malazan Empire, which is the 6th book of that series, and that is A Sail. And then AP and I will have our discussions on those, and then we will begin our read of Wars of Light and Shadow by Janny Wurts, which is her big series. So I'm very excited to be picking that up in the very, very, like in the next few days.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's going to be, I'm confident I will, because of two things. One, I have read To Ride Hell's Chasm and admire it tremendously. And two, I've met Janny Wurts, and she's really an incredible person. So
I've heard her speak a few times, and
I mean, she
really
is a force. She is a force of nature. And if you heard that chat we had on To Ride Hell's Chasm, where she was, there with Joanna and Blaze and myself, what a great discussion. I mean, you don't even have to have read the book to enjoy that discussion, because she's just so dynamic and so interesting, and where her ideas come from and her influences and just how eloquent she is in talking about all those things is just wonderful. But when you think about all the stuff that goes into this, and I know that the Wars of Light and Shadow is going to be an incredibly rich experience, so I'm really looking forward to it, and to my reread of the first two trilogies in the realm of the Elderlings. And we'll continue, although not all at once. No. We're going to read a trilogy and then do some other stuff, and then read a trilogy and do some other stuff. So it's probably will take a couple of years to get through all of the realm of the Elderlings that way, but that means I have lots to look forward to. So
that's right. Yes, it's a story that is not in a rush. I mean, it follows. I mean, we start with Fitz at age 6, and by the last book in the series, he's in his 60s. So we've got time to follow his story. You never feel rushed to read his story.
Well, I feel like we're lucky in that we fell into not only this genre where there's so many rich, wonderful reads that help us to understand our own experiences and appreciate them and appreciate other people, but we've also fallen into this beautiful community together. And I'm so glad, Derri, that you're part of this, and it's such a pleasure knowing you. And every time I see a comment from you, or see you in a Chatting with Nuts show or whatever, it's so much fun to interact with you, and I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you. Well, thank you, and I do appreciate that, and I do feel like I've found my people.
Yeah,
because everybody does want to talk about books and does want to hear what you think, so that they can go, oh, I never thought of that.
Exactly.
I love when that happens. I love it so much, because it enriches my experience of reading a book, to have heard somebody else's thoughts that I can take on board and keep in mind the next time I read it. And that's incredibly valuable, and it enriches everybody's life that is part of BookTube. And I think we have possibly the best corner of the internet that there is.
I have to agree. I mean, you won't hear any argument about that from me. So, but thank you so much for sitting down
and
welcome talking with me. And you've got me all excited for Realm of the Elderlings and Discworld and Janny Wurts and all this great stuff. So I'm just really incredibly happy to have had this chance to talk to you. So thank you very much. And thank you also to all the viewers, all of you out there, and leave your comments for Derri and myself, and go check out her wonderful channel. Derri's read it before. It is anybody even considering Realm of the Elderlings or Discworld, go and check it out. There's some rich, wonderful content there that will make your
spoiler free.
That's right, spoiler free, and it will absolutely make your experience of those series all the greater. So go and check it out. And once again, thank you, Derri, very much.
Thank you, Philip. I appreciate it very much.
All right, everybody. Till next time.